it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. And it feels alright.
Good evening, welcome along to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. Delighted to welcome a good friend of mine, Ian Murtagh, onto the show. How are you, Ian?
It's been a while, Steve, hasn't it? I think a man called Mike Ashley owned the club last time I was on.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Wow. I mean, we had some great chats back in the day of Toon Talk podcast, which was the very first Toon podcast that was ever invented. And a big shout out to the guys who put us together on that show. We had a great time. We had many shows. We used to do at least one a week, I think it was. And
That's right.
It was great days. But great to have you back on and happier times, Ian, as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Newcastle fans need to keep perspective. You know, yes, they've only lost 2 games, but the 2 games they've lost have been against 2 outstanding sides.
Yeah, 100%, mate. And yeah, lots to talk about tonight on the show. First and foremost, just a little introduction to those people who watch NUFC Matters who don't know you. You're a journalist, Ian. Who do you write for?
I've been freelancing now for 3 years after, my goodness, who haven't I written for? I've been covering the Northeast clubs now over 30 years, well over 30 years, in fact. You tend to see my stuff now in The Sun, The Mirror, The Express, The Star, and 442.
Yeah, fantastic, mate.
Yeah,
well, a lot of experience, and you've witnessed a lot of the ups and downs.
And not too many grey hairs either.
And not too many grey hairs at all. But yeah, I mean, look, let's look at the season. Last season first of all. Just give us your thoughts on the miracle of last season, because Eddie Howe turned perennial strugglers into the great escape artists, and then last season set about the job and wow, Champions League, Carabao Cup final. What was that like for you, Ian, watching that after watching 14 years of Mike Ashley's regime? Yeah,
listen, I mean, as you probably are aware, and a lot of fans are aware, I'm a good friend with Steve Bruce. I have been for many, many years, and I think he was dealt a tough set of cards. Eddie Howe's done a magnificent job, but it was the moment that Ashley left, the storm clouds lifted from the club, and it was like a weight off the players' shoulders as well. They ran out to cheers rather than waiting for the mistake and the anti-Ashley chance. So it was a very, very different environment. Now that's to take absolutely nothing away from Eddie Howe. He's a fine manager. He's done a terrific job. He's I can remember interviewing him when he was Bournemouth manager a few years ago. And I always thought he was destined for the Arsenal job after Wenger left, And so, I'm not surprised he's done well. I am surprised he's done as well as he has. Did Newcastle overachieve last season? Of course it did. It's almost unprecedented, Steve, for a side to be struggling the previous year and qualifying for the Champions League. What I will say, and this again is nothing to undermine Newcastle's achievement, they were fortunate in that three of the elite had poor seasons, i.e. Chelsea, Liverpool and Tottenham. But Newcastle were good enough to take advantage of that.
Yeah, certainly were, mate. Certainly were. And, this season, of course, is always going to be difficult because, as we know, fans' expectations have risen. And I would imagine that the owners' expectations will have risen as well, because once you get a taste of Champions League and a cup final when you're an owner, sometimes the perspective goes out of your mind and you think, well, actually, anything below that's failure. And I can imagine that this is going to be a tough season for Eddie Howe, and he needs to bounce back after those 2 defeats.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't know how the owners would react to tough times, do we? Listen, you're going to have to be a pretty good side to finish in the top 8 this season. Never mind the top 4. You just have to look at Newcastle's opponents on Saturday. Brighton, I think they finished with 6th or 7th last year. What a fantastic football side they are. So, again, let's have perspective here. Yes, Manchester City are good, but you know, as I say, 6th or 7th place wouldn't really be failure if you look at the bigger picture.
I mean, for us, it's about keeping your feet on the ground and just having that little bit of, common sense as a supporter. But unfortunately, that doesn't often go hand in hand, common sense with football fans. And I did notice after the Liverpool game, certainly on social media, Ian, a lot of people starting to criticise having a pop at how that's changed things. That's changed the whole dynamics of things now. In the past, you go down the pub, which people still do, you'd have a chat with your mates, you'd give an opinion. But now people are putting it out onto social media. And this does get picked up by people at the club. We saw that with Bruno last week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not Twitter's greatest fan or X's greatest fan, as we're meant to call it these days. And I always think social media, it's a channel for the unimportant to feel self-important, and we should take a large amount of the stuff that's on it with a pinch of salt. That Liverpool performance, I think a lot of people are too ready to look for scapegoats. Now, I think there's been one massive factor that's been overlooked from that game, Steve. I mean, it sparked so many talking points, but the one thing that hasn't really been spoken about was the performances, not just of Núñez, whose finishes were terrific. They were Shearer-like, weren't they? So but Harvey Elliott turned in one of the best half hours I've seen for a long time, and Diogo Jota as well. They came on the 58th minute. Now, I know a lot of Newcastle fans are pointing to the Newcastle substitutions, but I think Liverpool began to wrest control when Elliott and Jota came on, because Endo and, surprisingly, McAllister, I thought, had been pretty poor. Mm-hmm. So let's look at those substitutions first before discussing the Eddie Howe substitutions, which have come in for criticism. Some of it justified, I think, because those minutes from 58 to 73 minutes, yes, Newcastle had chances, but you just felt Liverpool were re-energized because, as I said, I thought they did very, very well. I think Joelinton, who was the best of the midfield triumvirate, needed to be careful about bookings because he was, he was getting stuck in, as they say. Now, Tonali, I know the fans love him, and he's an outstanding player. He does give the ball away a little bit too much, and I think just before his substitution, I think he gave the ball away 2 or 3 times, and I think that I think that was one of the reasons why Eddie Howe took him off as well. The substitution, which you find very, very hard to justify, was, of course, Harvey Barnes coming on for Anthony Gordon, who was magnificent on the afternoon. Now, I think, and you can count on one hand the amount of mistakes Eddie Howe's made in the last 18 months, 2 years, but I think they were pre-programmed substitutions, Harvey Barnes and Callum Wilson for Gordon and Isak. Isak, by the way, did very, very little in the second half. But yeah, so I thought they were pre-programmed, and really, with hindsight, I don't think Eddie Howe would have brought off Gordon. Having said that, there was a moment not long after the 2 substitutes had come on, which was almost a replicate moment of what happened in the Aston Villa game, when Harvey Barnes went down the left, squared it to Wilson. Wilson scored. This time, Harvey Barnes went for glory instead of squaring it to an unmarked Wilson. Had that gone in, it would have been a very different story. But as I say, I think too little has been made of just the impact Harvey Elliott and Jota made to that game.
I'd agree. I mean, that's what I've said this week, on the shows leading up to ours. And I think Salah dropping into midfield as well changed it, just that little tactical change. Fair play to Klopp. You've got to give credit to Klopp.
You do, absolutely.
And we weren't playing an amateur team here or a non-league team. This is Liverpool. This is a team which has got a bit of a hex over Newcastle as well.
Yeah.
And Eddie Howe's track record against Jurgen Klopp's teams is very poor. He's only had one win, of course, with Bournemouth against them. So, yeah, I've got to be honest. I agree, and I agree with everything you've said with regards to those substitutions. I think as well, just it's fine margins. If Almiron's shot goes in, if Alisson doesn't palm that away from the goal and he palms it into his net, Newcastle go 2-0 up, and it's a different story. But that's not what happened. And if the ball hadn't bounced up a backside and gone in past Pope, Newcastle get a 1-1 draw, which would have still felt, by the way, as if we'd been beaten. But ultimately, losing that game, I think we all left the ground really shell-shocked, Ian. But look, it's Liverpool. Put it into perspective. We're still, off those results of Aston Villa, Manchester City away, and Liverpool at home. Newcastle have got the same points, got slightly better goal difference than they had this time last season. We need now to put those games behind us and focus on Brighton, international break, and then Brentford, and hopefully pick ourselves back up. But interesting, the midfield three, isn't it? Because he's gone for Tonali, he's gone for Bruno, and he's gone for Joe Linton, which I think a lot of us probably expected. I think the person who I feel hard done by, who's hard done by, is Elliot Anderson, because he had a wonderful pre-season, and even in the substitutions at the weekend, Longstaff still gets in before him, and then Anderson. I felt that was a bit of a strange. I almost felt as if, because we've got 5 subs now, I almost feel like managers, not just Eddie Howe, feel like they've got to make them, Ian, because we've got 5 subs, we better put them all on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we're talking about a new era in football, aren't we? With 9 players on the bench, I do think that's the case. And yes, you've got to keep the squad happy, but does that have to be to the detriment of a player who was flying in Gordon? Because you could actually see the body language of Trent Alexander-Arnold when Gordon came off. You could see him visibly relax. It was very similar, actually. And again, it's a point that's been forgotten. Just before the Newcastle goal, Diaz, he turned Kieran Trippier inside out. No easy task, forcing Nick Pope into a pretty good save. And I was a little bit surprised that he was the one sacrificed to bring on the extra defender following the sending off, because you could see he was going to give Kieran Trippier a tough afternoon as well. So again, we're talking fine margins for both sides, but that's the nature of Premier League football in the modern era.
Can those 3 play together? Do you think they'll find a way? I've made a point on the show over the first couple of weeks that a lot of people are getting on Bruno's back, saying that he's not the player that he was. He's struggling. A lot of people are getting on Almiron's back, saying he's not the player he was. My mindset with that is that last season, when Bruno, Trippier, and Almiron linked up in that little triangle, a lot of our positive play came from that, and Almiron hit that rich vein of form. But I feel, because we put Tonali into the middle of it, I feel that they still haven't found the best way of playing the two together. Obviously we've got Joe Linton on the left of it, but I think Bruno and Almiron are suffering because of Tonali being in there, and I think that's where the issue lies. I think you either play Bruno or you play Tonali, and I think you need a Sean Longstaff or an Anderson in there with Joe Linton and Bruno.
Well, quite possibly. I mean, I'm talking to some of the Middlesbrough fans saying you can't judge your side until the transfer window is shut and you find out who's coming and going. And it's the same with Premier League teams. We're at the embryonic stage, aren't we? They're all new to each other, and nobody really knows what the best midfield is. At football, we as fans, as journalists, we all play football on paper, and we write down what we all think is the strongest lineup, Steve. And we don't know if it is. Who knows? It could be they found the best system without one of the star players. It remains to find out. What I would say is Bruno hasn't been the same player this year since his ankle knock. He struggled a little bit last season, and he's not at his best at the moment. I think he had a good driving run in the second half, which looked like the old Bruno. But yes, he gave the ball away for the goal, sorry about that. Right. Should he be dropped? I don't think so yet. But having said that, there should be no player in that side however his price tag, however his pedigree, who should be undroppable.
Yeah, I would agree, and I made a point on an earlier show about Bruno's had a lot of changes in his life, and he's got married. I'm not saying that should be the happiest. That's the happiest time of your life.
Yeah.
But on the other side, he's got kid. He's got a child, and we know as parents that can change things massively in the house.
Absolutely.
Lots of the dimensions of how you are at home, but also that bringing in another player who you've now got to learn to play with. This player is part of it. We know he had a bad week with responding to a tweet, and obviously the club dealt with that internally. But ultimately, all of these things do add up. And what we've got to remember is footballers are human. They're not robots. They're human.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine if we're talking in 6 months' time, Steve, then there will probably only be a couple of ever presents in that side. And I'm not just saying because of injuries, but there will be times when all three of those midfielders we're talking about will be out the side. I suspect for Joe Linton it will be when he gets up the bookings totted up. But to me, he's the most important of those three midfielders because of the aggression he gives to the side and the drive. But listen. I asked Eddie Howe after the game about the substitutions, and he, obviously used the word hindsight, which is the biggest word in football, isn't it, really? But he made at one point, he said, he knows what quality he does have on that bench, and he trusts that quality. So, when he threw on those players, he believed they wouldn't just steady the ship. He believed they would have a massive impact. Now, they didn't this time. But we saw last year. It's funny in that all our views, all our assessments, they almost change, week to week. If you remember before the Villa defeat, fans were saying, "Why is Sean Longstaff in the side?" Then his reputation soared when he was out of the side. If you'd asked every Newcastle fan, and they've got to be honest here, would Gordon have been in the side for Sunday? They probably wouldn't. More people would have started with Barnes. So, Almiron last year, everyone's raving about him. So we are changing, at the moment, he's not a scapegoat particularly, but at the moment, people are talking openly about leaving out Bruno Guimaraes. So this is going to happen to all of those players. Isak, there's a debate about him, isn't there? Because, Wilson certainly isn't striker number two. They're seen very much as equals by the management. So they are all going to have peaks and troughs as the weeks and months go by.
Interesting that, because I screenshotted something off Sky the other day, which we can debate here. Yeah. There's Isak versus Wilson, Premier League since the start of last season. This doesn't take into account the game at the weekend. Yeah. But appearances, 33 for Wilson, 24 for Isak. 19 goals for Wilson, 12 for Isak. Touches per 90 minutes, slightly better for Isak on that one. Percentage of touches in the box, 25% for Wilson, 17% for Isak. Some would say that's where it counts. Shots per 90 minutes, 3.59 for Wilson. Again, he's ahead in that, 2.93 for Isak. On target, 1.82, 1.52. And dribbles, 3.9, 1.7. Isak's better with a dribble. Probably that game last season where he went down the byline, beat about 5 players and crossed up a Jacob Murphy. But slightly better stats for Wilson. I mean, stats is what everybody seems to go with now. But is it time to give Callum a start?
It wouldn't surprise me if he started at Brighton. I think there's one stat that's not mentioned there. He is the Premier League's top scorer since April the 1st.
Yes.
I think it's 12 goals. I think has Haaland now got 12, or he might be on 11. But yeah, he's been outstanding, and you can't really separate the two. A lot of fans, and I'm not just talking Newcastle fans, football fans in general, it's a case of out with the old, in with the new. They want to see the new signings. They want to see the big money players, but football is played on grass, not paper, as I've just said. And there are going to be times when Longstaff or Anderson is going to be the best option in midfield, when Wilson's the best option on up front, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I think there will be a couple of changes, and that's just my own personal view. It wouldn't totally surprise me if Wilson comes in for that game. Yeah.
Yeah, I would be, I would be very supportive of that. I think you've got to mix and match. You've got to give people a chance. And Callum Wilson, certainly is, somebody who you would like to see back in the firing line, back scoring goals with that record that he's got. We've been the focus of a TV documentary, Ian.
Yeah.
I've found it interesting. I don't know whether you've managed to catch the first 3 episodes. The final one, of course, is on this coming Friday on Amazon. What have you made of that?
I think Newcastle fans will love it, do love it. I think the rest of the country are a little bit unimpressed. I think it is very much glossy brochure material. It's clearly under the editorial control of the Newcastle hierarchy, or at least has certainly had a say about it. I mean, do people want to see the rise of a club? Yes, Newcastle fans do, but the famous Sunderland documentary where even relegation, the Will Grigg, that was real drama. This one does seem a little bit stage managed. Of course, it's interesting because it's a club I report on, it's a club you support, but I think it's very much for the locals and for people who are very pro Newcastle.
Yeah, I would agree. It's had moments. There's bits about. I loved episode 3, and obviously we've just spoken about Callum and about Alexander. But those two in the competition, and of course, honesty. Nobody wants to sit on the bench. Nobody wants to sit there. But you've got an insight into what the players. I'd love to have had a bit more of that. I would love to have heard a little bit more from the players. But it's been very focused on Amanda and Murtagh and Darren Eales.
I must tell you this, Steve. I was at the premiere at the Tyneside Cinema, and the players were there, and we were interviewing Sean Longstaff, and of course, there'd been a few clips that had come out, hadn't there, before the launch, and he was saying all the players were in stitches that they showed the clip of Eddie Howe before Manchester United, because they said they managed to find the one segment where he's swearing, because he's a rarity in football management. He's not too foul-mouthed. He's not foul-mouthed at all. I've never heard him swear.
What's he like? I mean, obviously, we do a press conference review. I think one of the good things about the club under this ownership is there is at least some transparency from the press conferences, and we've often just had to rely on great journalists like yourself and Gibbo and Alan Oliver going back in the day, to give us the column inches to find out what's been said. But the club now release the press conference on YouTube, and they also release it on their official website. And for us as fans, it's fantastic to not only hear what Eddie's got to say in full, but also to hear the questions that journalists like you were asking. And I think has that put you guys under a little bit more pressure, because people maybe not know who you are, but they'll certainly know what questions are being asked now.
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. You don't. First of all, we've had cameras all the time, so you're not really conscious of them. From a print journalist's point of view, and my career has mainly been in newspapers, we would prefer it wasn't out there. But listen, the world's moved on. The world started moving on. I was around before Sky Sports News, before the internet, before social media. That was when people used to buy. The good old days when people used to buy a newspaper for news. When you used to get Russell Cushing would ring up the Chronicle and say, "Can you just put the paper? There's a pitch inspection," and people would get the late night find of the paper to find out if a match was going to be on or not. So things have changed so much. But listen, I mean, Eddie Howe is intelligent. He's articulate. He's got his views. He's pretty straight back when it comes to the transfer activity. He started off very unimpressive when he was asked about the Saudi situation. Now he blanks that in a very polite way. He said that's not my responsibility, and he's right. But he gets on well with everyone. He's a very decent human being and a more than decent football manager.
Yeah, it's interesting you touch on the Saudi stuff because, you know, we've had a lot of journalists on the platform. We always do. And, you know, Ben Jacobs been very vociferous about the Saudis. We've had, you know, Ross Gregory as well on the show quite a bit. Just saying that it would be better if we heard more from the Saudi ownership. Would you like to hear more from Yasser, maybe a news conference and get a chance to have a 30-minute chat with him where the questions were coming out? I mean, you can see, I guess, why he probably would never do it and just do these staged interviews where he flashes his inside of his jacket and it's black and white, which is great PR. But would you like the opportunity to have half an hour with him in the press room and just ask him a few questions?
To be fair, I think that you can say that about all the owners. Listen, I'll put my cards on the table. I would rather the club was not owned by the Saudis. I'm a member of Amnesty International. I find it very, very difficult to reconcile. Now, without getting in that argument, what I would say is this: when Newcastle's last great period, well, in the Premier League era, was when Sir John Hall was in charge there. When Newcastle were everyone's second favourite team. Mm-hmm. Now, I loved that. Newcastle were successful and they were loved. Mm-hmm. Now, it's just a pity that Newcastle, they are going to be successful, but there is going to be this controversy surrounding them all the time. It's going to be to the outside world, not so much Newcastle, tinged with this controversy. I'd prefer everyone to say, isn't it wonderful that this great club are back among the elite again? Without that, yes, I'd like the success, but you know, give me multi-billionaire owners without the human rights record of the Saudis, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I can understand it. We've had these discussions on here, and that's what this platform is all about. We're open to debate and listen to what people have got to say. I've always had the counter argument and said, look, you know, we were like that once as a country, not in our time, Ian, but obviously we were given the opportunity to change, and hopefully Saudi will change, and that might change people's opinions. But I understand it, and it is what it is. Newcastle have got, you know, the Saudis behind them, and we just have to wait and see how things develop. But I've got to be honest, I think it would be nice to hear from them. It would be good to hear more from them, and maybe we will in due course.
To be fair, we had an interview with Darren Eales just about 3 weeks ago, and Don Ashworth came in to join him for a little while. We got shown around the training ground since the £10 million refit, and you know, they're very impressive characters, and I think we're going to hear more from them.
Yeah, I mean, they are building a big corporate, commercial stuff. You know, a lot of people coming in. Silverstone's come in, and of course, on episode 4, which was leaked, which some people have seen. Obviously, we're going to hear about the infamous Adidas deal, which is going to be reincarnated in September.
Why on earth did Newcastle ever get rid of Adidas? It was a natural fit, wasn't it?
Yeah, you know, it was. I mean, that's just as important, though, isn't it, Ian? Building that kind of team behind the scenes on the commercial side and on the football side as building the team.
I'll tell you something funny. Going back to you'll probably remember it in the 80s when Greenall's were the sponsors. You couldn't find a Greenall pub for love nor money in the whole of the Northeast. And that was just typical of Newcastle United back then. You know, I mean, you know, I've talked about the 90s, you know, the Grandad shirt kit, everybody's favorite, the Newcastle Brown Ale emblem. It just felt right, didn't it? It felt appropriate. But, you know, times have changed.
They have. Okay, we're halfway through the show, mate. Time for the ads.
A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. You can find them at skipsandbins.com or telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website, skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Big thanks to Mr. Vicky's. Sauces handmade in Cumbria. You can order them from their website, mrvickys.co.uk, or by telephoning 01768 210 102. A big thanks also to New Workwear. You can find them at newworkwear.com. They are an agile and dedicated workwear provider. Welcome back as well to United Travel. They are a UK coaches firm and they are based in the Northeast. They've got 2024 tours and you can contact them on 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. Email info@unitedgrouptravel.com, and they've got a website which is unitedgrouptravel.com. There's no strangers on their tours, just people you haven't met yet. Big thanks to them for their sponsorship. Big thanks as well to Media Arts, and they supply all the video technology. If you want to become a member and get a cup, a pen, a membership card, and a scarf, then get your smartphone and put it over this QR code. It will take you straight to the membership pack. It's a £25 one-off fee. You can also go to NUFC Matters website and search membership pack to book today. If you want to help the channel, then subscribe to it by hitting the subscribe button. Hit the thumb up under the video to like the video, and click share to share to your other social media. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers. Don't forget, we help the food bank on this channel. If you want to do so virtually, go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and make a donation today. The Alan Shearer raffle is back on. 150 tickets, £1 a ticket. Win a limited edition signed Alan Shearer ball. Enter today at nufcmatters.com.
Second over the show, back with Ian Murtagh. Just want to talk about VAR. Ian, wow.
I hate it.
I mean, Mike Dean, though, coming out on the Simon Jordan podcast and saying what he said. And then I was tuned in before I went to the match at the weekend to watch Soccer Saturday. And, of course, Mike Dean is the referee who sits in the studio and gives us his views on controversial decisions. So Simon Thomas goes to him, asks him the question. That. Oh my God!
I know.
He dug a bigger hole for himself. I mean, Ian, should we just scrap it for now until we get all of this sorted out? Do you think?
Well, listen, goal line technology, no problem with that.
Brilliant.
But VAR, it's as subjective as a referee's decision was. It's still subjective. Your listeners and your viewers, they won't go to too many games outside the Premier League, I wouldn't have thought. But it's noticeable when you're watching teams like Sunderland and Middlesbrough, when they score goals, it's a slightly different reaction from the fans because there's not that doubt, because there's no VAR. And, it hasn't ruined football, but the spontaneity is in danger of going out of it. Now, if we're going to keep it, and I suspect it will be kept, is when they're drawing that line for offside, make the line thicker, give the benefit of the doubt to the forward, to the attacking player. Maybe let's not talk about arms and where your arm is. Shouldn't it just be where the boot is? Where the boot's on the turf, rather than the knee sticking out or the fingernail. I remember Chris Wilder during his Sheffield United days once talking about somebody's finger literally was the reason the player was ruled offside. So yeah, I'm not a great fan of it, and I think football was probably better before. I'm not a dinosaur because I think the technology, it's wonderful now. The goal line technology is there. And I'm all in favour of so many introductions into football. Yesterday, I went to the Blythe Spartans Spennymoor match, and it was a woman referee, and she was absolutely outstanding. And her assistants were male. She was wonderful, and she had a great rapport with the with the players. And I'd love to see that in football. But let's some innovations are good, some aren't good.
Yeah, I mean, we watched the Women's World Cup, and in the Women's World Cup, as it is in rugby, as it is in cricket, we can hear the decisions. And I think that's the most frustrating thing for me. At St. James's Park, for instance. I mean, I could name every Premier League ground and criticise something to do with VAR. But in Newcastle, at this moment in time, we only have one screen in the ground, which is up in level 7. Now, not everybody can see that screen. No. And if the person at pitch side doesn't relay the message that there's a VAR check to Rob Byron, who's the stadium announcer, then the issue is that people in the ground haven't got a clue what's going on when the game is stopped. Yeah. And this is the problem. So
it's the same in the press box.
Yeah, so you must be sitting there scratching your head going, well, is it a VAR check?
Is there a VAR? That's right. At least in cricket and tennis, it does work. And but in football, listen, in 10 years' time, we might be saying how wonderful it is and all the rough edges have been smoothed out and it works, but it's not working properly, is it?
No, definitely not working at this moment in time. I tell you what else isn't working at the moment in football in general, and that's the Spanish FA. They're all going out on strike or resigning. What have you made of that? I mean, I've got to be honest, I sat there and watched the final and then watched the presentation. And like everybody else around the world, I was astounded at what this guy was doing. I mean, can you believe that he's had the audacity not to resign now?
Listen, why did he do it? He lost control of himself, basically. Give them a hug in the same way a father would give a daughter a hug. Slap them on the back. But don't do that. And it has actually exploded, hasn't it? And I can't see any way back for the man. I mean, basically, when you've got all these resignations because he's still in the job, then surely he must see common sense must prevail, and he needs to step down.
Getting back to Newcastle and Premier League football and Championship football, because you do cover Sunderland and Middlesbrough as well. Yep. There seems to be a big push for something that football clubs tried and the government tried in the 80s. What I'm referring to is digital ticketing. And essentially back in the 80s, Colin Moynihan under Margaret Thatcher, who was the sports minister, tried to bring in ID cards, and this was after the horrendous hooliganism scene had taken off, and there was people injured, and lots of horrendous scenes. Of course, we had Heysel, we had Hillsborough, we had the Bradford fire, those horrendous incidents in the 80s, and football stadia changed with the Taylor report and so on and so forth. But what I'm getting at here is that digital ticketing has come in at Middlesbrough, it's come in at Sunderland, and it's come in at Newcastle. And really, it's been thrust upon us as a fan base, something we aren't really all happy with, and it's changing the face of football. And we haven't really been asked about this. It's been put on us. Correct. And it's causing a lot of anxiety. It's causing a lot of grief. And I can really look at it from a Newcastle fan's perspective. I know fans who, for the first two home games, have missed 40. Well, some people missed about 14 or 15 minutes for the first game. On Saturday, the Liverpool game, people missed about 10 minutes in the East Stand. So there's 25 minutes of football people in the East Stand have missed. I know people in the Melbourne Stand have had to queue up staircases. Some people who struggle to stand for any length of time. I'm sure there must be a health and safety issue with these kind of things. That's Newcastle in general. We saw Arsenal on the opening day of the season. The game had to be delayed by half an hour.
That's right.
Ian, this seems to be something that's been brought in like behind the scenes, and
you're right. It's been, as you said, it's just been presented as a fait accompli, hasn't it? And it's actually affecting members of my family. Two of my lads live in Manchester, but there are in the family group there was 4 season tickets between 5 or 6 people. Now, in the past, it was just a case of you leave the ticket at the family home and the card at the family home, and they collect, and you can't do that now. I've got friends friends who live a long way away, and they share season tickets. The 3 share one of them. That's going to present problems. Then, of course, you've got some of the older fans who might not have mobile phones, or they certainly don't have Androids or iPhones. It's very hard. I've got an elderly auntie who's scared to go to car parks in town because she wants to put her money in the slot machines rather than carry a phone around. So it is. I mean, I think the whole world now presumes everyone is tech savvy and does all the latest equipment, and it is a problem. Again, 5-10 years time, it will all get sorted out. But yes, I think this is a problem for football fans from Newcastle right down to Exeter.
I mean, I think it needs to be looked at. I think I think there's issues. I think what they're trying to do is, I think football clubs as a whole are trying to gentrify the support. I think they're trying to force certainly out of away games. I think they're trying to stop certain fans going to away games, and ultimately they've been the heartbeat of Newcastle United support for many years. And I think there was another instance. I mean, I could reel off a load, but another one which surprised me. You're supposed to be able to transfer your ticket to somebody who's on your friends and family list for free. Yep. That's what they said. You can do it for free. Now, I know somebody who couldn't go to the Liverpool game at the weekend, who sits in a certain area of the ground. They went to transfer the ticket to somebody, and they were charged £24.26 by the club. Now, this is supposed to be your ticket, which you've purchased for that seat. And you're supposed to be able to transfer that to somebody as long as they're in the friends and family. But because it was against Liverpool, it's classified as a Category A game. Now, that means that the club are now, for want of a better expression, profiteering off my ticket or your ticket or my mate's ticket. Because if you want to sell your ticket at the game, they are now saying, right, well, if you want to do that, it's £24.26 because the ticket was £34. But because it's Liverpool, tickets in that particular area of the ground are £58 and whatever. So we want the difference.
It's a very good point. And there'll be numerous examples up down the country. There'll be numerous examples, and I don't know the answer. I mean, I'm privileged. I just flash my press card and I get in. Members of my family, they're far more au fait with what is happening and the problems that they're encountering.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, look, you cover the Northeast beat. Let's just have a little chat about Sunderland and Middlesbrough. And the reason I'm doing that is because you and I both are on the Tyne Radio, which is by the fans, for the fans, and set up by a good pal of ours. And tell us first of all the show that you're doing.
Well, the show I'm doing is called Black and White and Red All Over, and it's 7 till 8 on a Friday night, immediately after the Three Legends. Now, what's happening, unlike your show, which is specifically for a Newcastle audience, it's when the three stations come together to make Northeast Radio, Cats Radio, Reds Radio, Tyne Radio. So there are people listening from Tyneside, Wearside, Teesside, and all parts in between. So I've got to concentrate on all three clubs. I want to. I've been covering the Northeast patch for so long now that I'm an unashamed fan of all three. Sorry, people might not like that, but I want them all to succeed well. So yes, it's been going well so far. I had my good friend Michael Bridges as a guest on the first show. Keith Downey was on the second. I had the Newcastle press officer Ryan Parish, the media manager, on, and this week on Friday, I'll always have a journalist as well, but I always try and bring another guest as well. And I'm going to have a guy called Matt Ketchell, who is the deputy editor of 442 magazine. Now, I don't know if you know this, but it celebrates its 30th anniversary, 442, next year. And this is the first time that Newcastle United have been on the front cover in all that time. So I'm going to talk to him about, what the magazine, it's not a newspaper. It's what it does. It likes to look at the foreign football, European football, left field football, non-league football. So I'm looking forward to having a chat with him about it as well.
Yeah, I follow Ketch on Twitter and saw the design, and it's absolutely fantastic.
Well
worth getting a copy of that, and it'll be a good read, I'm sure. But superb. Well, don't forget you can catch Ian on a Friday night, 7 to 8. That's well worth tuning into. The Champions League, Ian. It's a while since we stood at St James's Park and heard that wonderful music. How much are you looking forward to that?
It's going to be tremendous, isn't it? I've got to tell you this story. When that famous Barcelona game back in '97, I was working for the Journal at the time. And I'd just been given this new state-of-the-art computer. And at the end of the game, I was so pleased with what I'd written. But suddenly the sidebar came up and thought, what the hell do I do here? Do I press cancel? Do I press abort? I pressed abort. I lost everything. Unfortunately, my adrenaline was just so high at the time. there were still copy takers in those days. So, and the deadline, I had about 20 minutes. I just ad-libbed this report, and it came across all right because it's probably the one game in the world I was able to do that, because it was just such a tremendous game. And, going back to that game again, everyone talks about Keith Gillespie and Tino Estrella quite correctly, but they forget what a magnificent performance Shay Given gave in the last half hour of that game. And Newcastle could quite easily have lost. So, let's have more games like that. It would be tremendous. And listen, I know I've got mates who are, they're looking at flight details, and the second the draw's made, they're going to try and book flights, and they think they found the shortcut, saying, oh, well, if we fly from Edinburgh, it would be £200 cheaper than if we fly from Newcastle. It's all the fun of it, isn't it? It's great fun. I remember back in the about 20 years ago, when both Middlesbrough and Newcastle were in Europe, and we actually thought, now we could actually choose which one we went to. It was fantastic, when there was one time, I think Middlesbrough at Villarreal and Newcastle at Sashow, and half the Northeast Press lads chose Sashow, half of them chose Villarreal, and great days.
How much do you think that's going to impact on Newcastle's Premier League season?
We don't know, but it will impact. Now, the squad is stronger now. We know that. But, people talk about Thursday night football impacting more than Tuesday, Wednesday night football. And I've never understood that, because if you play on a Thursday, you go to a Sunday, so I've never understood that way. It remains to be seen. It is going to be new. It's going to be new for everyone, fans, journalists, but above all the team and the management. And it can be an energy sapping. I remember, again, going back to those days, Alan Shearer's testimonial was it was the day after Middlesbrough had lost the UEFA Cup final in Eindhoven, and we were all absolutely shattered, because obviously a major European Cup final, we'd be working, 25 hours a day to get that done. And I remember Shearer came into the press room afterwards. He said, "What's wrong with you lot? You look knackered. Looks as if you'd be playing." We were. I think we got in about 5 that morning. But yeah, it changes everyone's schedule. It changes everyone's life. It's certainly more exciting, and bring it on.
Yeah, bring it on. I mean, for you, Ian, as a reporter and covering the Newcastle beat as you do, would you say that it's more important Newcastle winning some silverware or qualifying for Europe?
Oh, $6 million question, isn't it? Silverware. Silverware. Having said that, I'm not the biggest fan. As a kid, I never ever mourned a League Cup defeat. I always mourned an FA Cup defeat. The FA Cup meant something to me as a kid, and losing games in January, that hit hard. League Cup, I could give a take. So I would prefer personally to scrap the League Cup, bring back replays, and have the FA Cup back in its old traditional way, which was the best competition in the world.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that's what will kickstart Newcastle as a big club once they get that elusive trophy? Because we're here to go on about it, but Bob Moncur was the last person to lift one in 1969, and of course we haven't won a domestic trophy since '55, with the FA Cup. And
in 35 years of covering Northeast football, the only trophy I've seen was Middlesbrough winning the League Cup at Bolton at the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. Listen, Newcastle will be, and always have been, a big club. So Sunderland, everyone says what constitutes a big club? Well, fan base. To me, it's got to be fan base, and Newcastle are one of the best supported clubs in Europe, and I'm sure Newcastle fans, yes, they take the mick out of Sunderland, but they look and they think 42,000, that division, when what they've gone through, that's pretty good. Northeast fans are magnificent, and Middlesbrough, it's a smaller fan base, but their away following is superb, absolutely superb. So they're not as big. But yes, Manchester City, because of what they've done in the last decade or so, they have become a big club. Are they as big as Manchester United? Probably not. As I said, two of my sons are living in Manchester, and they were brought up thinking Manchester is full of City fans, and all United fans live in London, etc., and Brighton. And they said, basically, there's 3 or 4 Manchester United fans for every City fan in the city of Manchester. So, yeah.
Are we going to see? Oh,
go on.
Are we going to see Sunderland or Middlesbrough back in the Premier League anytime soon, do you think?
I don't know. A little bit worried about Middlesbrough. I've seen 2 of the games. They're unconvincing. And Steve, what they did last year, they got some excellent loan signings in. Now, the problem with that is that the moment they lost in the playoffs, those players weren't going to come back. They've lost Akbom as well. And so, yeah, they're having to rebuild big time. Sunderland, I mean, my goodness, if Newcastle fans are long suffering, then those ones down the road are even more so. Sunderland they've connected with the fans again, and that squad's got it's got real identity. Very, very young squad. They do play super football. Far too early to say, let's see if this Ukrainian striker, whose name I forget, is going to come in. Let's see if Ross Stewart gets fully fit to score goals. They've got some very, very exciting youngsters. And I defy even the most blinking Newcastle fan to dislike Tony Mowbray. He's a lovely guy. In fact, we've got the 3 guys managing the 3 big Northeast clubs of highly likable individuals.
Tell us about young Riggs as well. I mean, Newcastle United let him slip through the net. How big a player is he going to be? He certainly he made his debut, of course, last season.
Yeah.
But that kid looks like he's got goals in him, and I think he'll be unleashed sooner rather than later.
Well, as I say, he's a good player. He hasn't had his chance yet this season, although he did score in their pre-season 2 of the US. He's good. He's good. The one that I really like is Dan Ballard, the big centre half who they got from Arsenal, and Pierre Ekwa, the young lad in midfield who they got from West Ham. Those 2 outstanding prospects. So it's great. It was funny, as I said, I mentioned you before, and I went to Blythe yesterday and I bought the programme, and I've forgotten who the guy was, but the feature was, who's the best player you've ever played with? And he said, Chris Rigg. Who's the hardest opponent? He said, Lewis Miley. So he said, it's great in this area that we've got 2 of the hottest prospects in the country.
Good to see Newcastle bringing in some young players as well. I mean, obviously, we've got a few coming through the academy. We've got Lewis Miley, as you mentioned, Elliot Hansen, bit of success with him. We've got 1 or 2 others coming through. Newcastle as well also seem to be now doing something that they haven't done for years, which is buying young players in. And we saw the first signing of the summer was Yankuba Minte. They obviously signed Garen Kowal last year. That's important as well, isn't it? Building the youngsters and building teams for the future.
It is. And let's cast our minds back 30 years, Steve, and when Kevin Keegan did a great job at Newcastle, but he also did untold damage getting rid of the reserve side, if you remember, because I think there was a rule change and they weren't allowed to play at was it Gated Stadium?
Yeah,
and basically, when you're taking away that tier, then it does more damage in the medium to long term than you realize at the time. And so, yes, Newcastle and any club needs to be successful at all levels, or not necessarily successful, but that conveyor belt needs to keep on moving. And if it stalls, then it can prove very costly for a club. It can prove very dangerous for a club.
Finishing up on Newcastle, and just you mentioned the support. We've got a full stadium, again, 52,000, and Newcastle developing the corporate areas as well. Ticket prices are going to go up, but the demand is clearly there. They brought out a membership scheme. Thousands of people have joined that, and in the hope of getting a ticket. They're going to have to expand. They're certainly looking at expanding. Is that something that you're a supporter of, first of all, seeing the ground expand? And would you support a move away from St James's if it was needed to get more people in?
No, to the second question. Newcastle's the best located stadium in England, bar none. The only one I can compare it to is the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. Huge asset for the city. And, they call it the Cathedral on the Hill. And it is. You see it driving across the Tyne Bridge or just before the Tyne Bridge. And by the way, isn't it great that that's going to get redecorated because it's been an embarrassment for too many years. And listen, I mean, it is going to be costly. There's going to be a disruption, but you've got to have the supply to satisfy the demand. Now, Newcastle clearly aren't going to be they're a boom club. Now, if bust comes, it's going to be a long, long time in the future, if at all. So Newcastle could easily fill 62, 70,000. I wouldn't go too much more than that, because I think from a business point of view, the club probably, it's always healthy for a club when you have got so much demand. But I'd love to see that stadium. Let's not forget Freddie Shepherd. He planned on expanding it in his time, and of course the feasibility study was drawn up behind the Gallagher Den. There's going to be a casino hotel, and then immediately when Mike Ashley came in, he cancelled that, and it was put into cold storage for all these years.
Yeah, interesting stuff. That's a great hour, Ian. Delighted to have you on the platform.
Yeah, it's lovely, Steve.
Yeah, great to be reunited. We'll get you back on again if you're up for it, and keep up the great work on the radio show, mate. Look forward to listening to that every Friday night at 7:00, mate. But Ian, thanks very much, mate. Catch up soon. Take care.
All the best, Steve. Take care. Bye-bye.